I hope all of you can see the screen.
Yes, the screen is visible.
Okay. Today I have termed my lecture, rather I have titled my lecture as how to get a better yields, how to get to better yields using the third methodological paradigm. Now, as my little sister Purva has just mentioned, that I would be emphasizing on the mixed method. Mixed method is usually called the third paradigm after the quantitative and the qualitative. Now, why do we call it the third paradigm? To begin with, we call it the third paradigm because there is one paradigm which is the positivist paradigm. There is one paradigm which is the post-positivist paradigm, where you get both constructivism as well as interpretism. So when you are moving on from this path and trying to put together more than one paradigm for your research purpose, we call it the third paradigm. I'm not getting into the paradigm war or how this paradigm came into existence, because that is absolutely theoretical. And I don't think in a research, I would say a PhD research work course, I don't think that is very much necessary. When we go about through the academics, we deal with them. So from here, I'm trying to move on to what research we are referring to. We are referring to research as a scientific and systematic investigation or inquiry, especially through search for new facts in any branch of knowledge. It is not that we have to look for knowledge in our particular subject. We can look through any research methodology into any kind of any branch of knowledge for that matter. That is exactly why you will understand why the different branches of science today are made to look into the social science factors also. So we can take a definition about it, that is systematized effort to gain new knowledge can be observed and documented. Hence, if it can be observed and documented, we call it empirical. So when it is empirical, it refers to experience with our senses. Anything that is empirical, we refer to that has to have some kind of a physical, sensical experience. And what are the characteristics that are related to it? They focus on observable phenomena that are absolutely strictly drawn from the contemporary, concretely verifiable empirical evidence. I just said that it is empirical. So if it is empirical, it should be verifiable. It should be related to the contingent conditions in which that kind of a social problem has arisen, and we are studying it. And of course, as I said, without methodological understanding, there can be no such study. And so it is a scientific method that we need to follow. Now, empirical refers to using the evidence that is collected through observation or experience, or by using calibrated scientific instruments. Now, when we are doing some experimental research, of course, in sociology, as I am a sociologist, I'll go by that. We do not go by any experimentation. So we don't look into any scientific instruments of that kind, but scientific instruments of the methodology. So there could be instruments like if you have a questionnaire which has a validity and reliability checked, it is an instrument. It is a methodological instrument. And that should be able to give you enough information to be replicable, and the results should be convincing. Of course, there are a large number of limitations to any research, and out there into the field of research, we cannot ignore that what we are doing is not the end of it. And neither can we say that what we are explaining and what we are looking at cannot be explained or cannot be looked into it from a different context. So the limitations, quote unquote, is furthering the research and how far that research can go from amp number of perspectives. From here on, I start moving into what I am supposed to deliver today, that is the mixed method research methodology. So what I am trying to put forward, because my first slide and the title itself, I think, spoke about it, and that is why you select a particular method for a particular research. So selection of a method is basically based on the phenomena in context, the research question in context, the area, the sample, the kind of audience that you would get, the kind of outcomes you expect, and how do you do that? You do that based on the background literature, on the background available secondary data, which will give you the answer to the question, what kind of a methodological perspective or a research design should I follow for my research? So, for every research, there is a specific tool befitting the work. I will not say that you can generalize about it, but of course, there is some or the other specificity for each research. And if there is no specificity, that is the rational or the research question that you want to put forward, then you cannot do research, because that is where you get stuck until you formulate your research question. You cannot identify the scope of that research. And when the scope of the research is identified, the method for the research attains a scientific finding. And by doing that, the method you want to go forward with, whether it's the positivist method or the post-positivist method, it should give you a kind of understanding as to what is going to be my audience of study. So if my audience, or the population for that matter, if I use the right terminology, if that is what is going to answer my question, then I should be able to put together the understanding as what the others, the researches that have been done on that area, put forward. And that enables me the understanding of the kind of change that I'm looking towards, or what my research should bring forward. If I cannot point out what my research is going to bring forward, what is the acquired knowledge that is forthcoming from the results of my work, then I cannot say that there is a rationale behind doing this work. So all this put together gives me a choice, or gives me the orientation towards trying to pick from quantitative or qualitative methods that offer different kinds of approaches of assessing, addressing, processing, and implementing evidence-based interventions, or the results which can even go to the limits of addressing a particular policy. So both quantitative and qualitative method have their outcomes, they have their results. We cannot say that one is absolutely very good and very implementable, the other is not. So the paradigm on which we are standing points towards looking at that end, which will be enabling us to understand what difference can my research bring about, and what is the specific finding that my research could address or may be able to address. And for that, what is the specific tools and techniques that I should use? There are some significance of choosing the methodological paradigms, and the basic significance can be divided into two. First is the philosophical assumption, which provides the foundation and shapes the development of the research project. And the second is the theoretical foundation, which gives us the lens taken by the researcher to provide the direction for the phases of the research. When I come to how you're going to do this, you will understand that why I'm talking about a particular theoretical lens and how that can help you integrate the data depending upon the extent of emphasis on a particular kind of technique that you have taken. And both quantitative and qualitative approaches, when combined, of course, give us a huge breadth and depth of the understanding, maybe something that has come by some outcome that we have come to learn about through the positivist understanding does not get corroboration from the qualitative. Then there is a conflictual understanding as to why this and why not that. So there we could raise a question and ask ourselves that why such a difference between the understandings? What is the difference between the perspectives in which people have understood this? understood this question when I am putting it into alternatives that I am giving and when I'm asking them an open-ended question. So that again raises the same question as to how far the two perspectives, that is the quantitative and the qualitative perspective, or the approach for that matter, combined serves the purpose of enhancing our understanding of the outcomes. And as I began, and I want to emphasize on that, all this is absolutely evidence-based understanding. I repeat, it is evidence-based because it is a holistic view. I gave you an example just a few minutes back as to you put a question in your interview schedule or questionnaire if it has its reliability and validity checked. And when you are applying that, you have certain answers and alternatives to the questions given in the schedule. And when that schedule is applicable or given to the population, your sample, they answer you in one perspective. And when you ask them the same question in a different word, but the answer, you are trying to address the same part of your research, you may get a different answer. So it says that the rationale is that no single research approach is sufficient by itself to capture the breadth and depth of the research problem. And so to get a holistic view of evidence-based understanding, you need to have both evidences. One evidence which is based on the structured, perceptual, rationalized understanding that the researcher is putting forth, and the other, which is the perceptual understanding or the way your particular sample is interpreting it. And from that follows the complementarity of the strengthened by the other approaches. It is useful in understanding the information which is both social and natural in nature and presents a full picture of the phenomena. When understood in the perspective of quantitative research, since the alternatives given in the interview schedule or the questionnaire, whatever you're used by the researcher, it carries a lot of subjective understanding of the researcher. And because it carries a lot of subjective understanding of the researcher, it automatically is value-laden. So if you are giving a value-laden understanding, ask for the other value-laden understanding from the other perspective, match it, and try and find out which is the closest and how far it does corroborate or does not conflict. It can be both. But usually you will get a larger and full picture of maybe the way the researcher is understanding it is not the right way of putting the whole perspective. It could be different. I'll give you an example here. I did a survey long back. It was in 2011. It was a survey on elderly women who had migrated from Bangladesh and who are settled on the fringes of West Bengal. And they are now, I had a population of, say, 164. And it was, if I divide the population into two, one part of it was those who came to India when they migrated, they were already married. And one part who got married after they migrated here. It was forced migration. It was the Bangladesh war and post-Bangladesh war, forced migration. So they carried a lot of baggage, socio-cultural baggage from their country, from where they were thrown out. So that of course has that impact. And when questions put to them about their health ideas and how health structure in West Bengal was helpful or not, there was stark difference between the answers of the two samples, the one which came here married and the one which came here and got married. Now, why do I put this in perspective? Because this is related to their age. So this is related to their adaptation capability. This is related to their socio-economic status as well as the social status in the particular vicinity in where they are residing. All this put together, when the structured questions were given to them, the answers that came, when later on we went in with some very in-depth understanding or questioning of these people, the understandings did corroborate but gave us some other references from where this kind of an understanding came. For one example I'll give you. When asked what illness was, what they thought about illness, or what was illness, that particular group which came here, when they came here, they were already married, were the higher age group. And they had certain reservations in terms of health system. How they would approach the health system, they had certain reservations. So according to them, illness or illness behavior was related to some kind of quote unquote pap. That is the wrongdoings we do in our life. Whereas the other group had not given this kind of an answer. But when they gave us the answer in the structured interview schedule, there the answers were, do you consider your illness and suffering to be painful? Yes, no, yes. But when asked why do you consider it painful, some of them said it's painful because it's an illness. Those who came here and got married, the lower age group. But the others, when asked, they gave us amp number of examples of why it should be considered as a kind of wrongdoing, punishment for wrongdoing, so on and so forth. So this is how it comes out, and this is how we try and understand, because when we are doing a particular research, we don't want to take into account the perspective of the other, your sample, and you just want to take the answer from them, put it into a table, and numbers do the work, then mixed method does not serve the purpose. So Patton has said that paradigm of choices is related to recognizing that different methods are appropriate for different types of questions. And the panoramic view of the research landscape that you are trying to address has many, many different viewpoints. And these viewpoints, if you really want to explore it, you need to explore it through diverse perspectives, because that will uncover the different kinds of intricate layers that exist in that particular perspective. One might say that, okay, I feel that the way I am treated here in this area is not right. The other person might say, she does not go to the health center to take help because she's not interested in having the proper identity cards that are needed to go to the health center. So this is how the whole thing came out, and there were significant findings which could be referred to policymakers to find out what was really going on there. From here, I move on to the different philosophical foundations of mixed method. And mixed method research is basically has 4 pragmatic perspectives. And these can be further divided, but I will go by these 4 perspectives. The first is the pragmatism. The focus is on what works using the appropriate method. Second is transformative perspective. This is a critique of the pragmatist perspective. And this is basically trying to address what works for whom or who. Dialectics, the very word dialectics tells us that it is between two. So it is freedom to choose the appropriate method that can be consistent with the research problem and researchers' belief, and not affiliate the same to a particular theoretical lens. So we need to look from the perspective of the research problem and how the researcher wants to address it. And the fourth is critical realism, which is world can be constructed through our individual standpoint and measured and verify underlying structures of reality and try and particularly view the causal relationships. I'll go by one through this. Coming to pragmatism for that. Pragmatic research is similarly able to maintain both subjectivity in their own reflection of the research and objectivity of data collection and analysis, and trying to focus on the kind of things happening differently over our research area, as well as trying to connect the different abstract issues and epistemological level to the methodological level. We try what they are trying to do here is trying to it sort of offers a number of bridges between certain dichotomies. Knowledge can only provide us information about our action, their results, and once and all truth. No, pragmatism breaks down the hierarchies between the positivist and the constructivist way of knowing and tries to look into meaningfully both. And via doing this, it utilizes transferability, and it considers how one particular pragmatic means of understanding, that is the positivist means of understanding, can help construct the and justify the meaning of the other. So special cases of integration of divergent results can be expected from pragmatism. And of course, it looks at the lived experiences, that is the qualitative understanding, and the reliability of empirical counts, that is the quantitative understanding, which are both important for understanding a particular phenomena, because it suits the paradigm, and it sort of brings forth what are the two differences that we are trying to look into, and whether at all these two differences, if there are at all differences, whether they are compatible to each other, whether they are supporting each other, or whether they are conflicting with each other. Coming to transformative paradigm. This is basically a metaphysical umbrella that brings together many philosophical strands where social justice actually operates as a first principle. It is applicable to people who experience discrimination and oppression on whatever basis. It can be race, ethnicity, migration, disability, whatever. It can be anything. But it is also a social transformation that is addressed among these inequities, and the characteristics associated with access to social justice. So these particular studies which entail transformative paradigm, they are applicable to the power structure that permeates the equalities. Say, for example, gender studies. If you look at the feminist perspective, there is nothing in the, not even in the first wave, not second, third, fourth, whatever wave you go by, all the waves are related to some kind of inequitable relationships. That is the study of the power relations. There's a structural power relations that is related here. So community of people, according to transformative paradigm, it tries to look at building relationships with the communities and viewing them as research participants. And these people in the community who are involved in the research are looked at in a very culturally sensitive way. Why? Because people are culturally sensitive. And cultural sensitivity is a very, very important aspect of implementation of anything. Whether you want to ask questions in your research, or for that matter, if you want to make something culturally equivalent, culturally determined, you need to look at the sensitivity of the audience that you're trying to look into. It also determines any impact across diversities, investigations of power dynamics. And by utilizing the qualitative data collection method, here you can understand what the people themselves understand about that particular understanding. And if they give you the, if they can further your understanding by giving you and provide you a mechanism of trying to address the complexities that are coming out because of the cultural complex setting, then that provides a lot of basis, that provides a lot of understanding. And the transformative paradigm, of course, will allow you to look into the paradigm and associate some philosophical assumptions that will provide the framework of looking into this kind of injustice, discrimination, different kinds of marginalization, and the like. Moving on from here to the dialectical method. Now, dialectics is, as I just began when I showed you the first slide, I said that dialectics is, of course, between two. It has to be more than one to be a dialectical understanding. So, a dialectical perspective brings together two or more paradigms in a respectful dialogue. So when you are trying to do a dialectical understanding through mixed method, what you do is exactly you are trying to address some dissonant data, some data which is not exactly supportive of each other. The data is giving you some conflictual ideas. It is based on the process of the components of the dialectics. Now, what does this mean? In the process of trying to understand or unravel the research understanding, you sort of unearth a kind of dialectical process that gives you an understanding that there are opposing values in the same process. There could be opposing values. It is not that whatever people are saying, what you are seeing apparently, and what people are saying does not have any kind of binary. There remains a binary, and there remains some kind of unequal weightage between groups. Where there is a hierarchy, there is definitely a binary. Any hierarchical system in anywhere in the world has a binary. So to believe that something is not, or something that you're seeing cannot be inferred in the way you're seeing, you need to ask and need to get those cross dialogues to include and understand and construct and reconstruct the paradoxes that are there, and try and unravel the paradoxes so that you can put forward a smooth understanding, which may itself entail both the dialectics or even more than one. It could have both sides of the dialectics, it could have three sides of the understanding, but it should be there. Coming to critical realism, there may be multiple perspectives, one single event or object, but when utilizing the compatibility thesis of worldviews supporting this particular point, that quantitative and qualitative research can work together to address each other's limitations, the very question that we want to put forward here, or the very question that comes up, is that the particular understanding of critical realism is emphasizing that there is a particular causal relationship. And because there is a causal relationship, you are trying to embody a constructivist epistemology that believes in a particular world that is constructed through individuals' standpoint. So there may be multiple perspectives to a single event or an object, but multiple perspectives cannot be viewed in multiple arenas. The same thing viewed in multiple perspectives, when put together in a causal relationship, may address a particular limitation that each of these perspectives are having. There's a very old fable, which I can use as an example here, is about the six blind men and the elephant. I think all of you have read this, and all of us have read this, that there were six blind men of Hindustan who one day went and bumped against a huge something. What was that huge something? Now they had each in front of them, they with their hands, because they were blind men, whatever they did was through touch. So when they were touching the particular elephant at whatever part of their body, it could start from a wall to end up to a rope, to a fan, to a pillar, or whatever. But was the elephant that? No. But yes, the elephant was all together. If you put all these perspectives together, and if a particular artist draws according to these blind men's perception of what they are understanding. Of course, you can reach up to a particular, one particular shape. It may not be the round back of the elephant, but these two things put together at least addresses something that is huge because they cannot see it. But when you come put the same analogy to somebody who can see it and understand it, the perspective may be different, but the emphasis on the causal relationship of the different perspectives might help you to reach the goal. So the goal is to measure and verify underlying structures in reality. And the underlying structures of reality should, for that matter, try and be as objectively as possible measured. But again, critical realism does point out that the belief or that objectivity can be absolutely known is not true. It can only be approximated. So the results that a particular research wants to generalize has to use a particular theory as the guiding process to try and make some assumptions which can be factually generalized later. And when you try and generalize something which is an outcome of your research, with both, say, quantitative and qualitative research emphasizing, you need to show how there is a particularly causal relationship between the events that have given you that outcome. So you need to believe that constructed through the individual's standpoint and perception, along with the researcher's standpoint and perception, the outcome that you are being able to go to, the outcome that you are reaching is generalizable, and that can be found. And that is, it can be replicated. Because research is that, it is all about replication. So, alas, the continuing conundrum is that there is no such thing as qualitative data. Everything is either a 1 or a 0. But researchers today, after the war that began in the late 1980s and that has percolated down today to giving us numerous, I would say, n number of qualitative research methodologies, we do stand on a continuum from a mono method via using multiple methods to mixed method. So this particular conundrum of having no such thing as qualitative data stands on a very, very wrong paradigm. And the paradigm that has emerged today is the third methodological paradigm, the mixed method. So my question that I have raised for myself is mixing and why. We can always say that quantitative methods are the best, and the research question drives everything. Qualitative methods are the best. But the picture on the slide that you can see lower down is about a small ship that is moving towards an iceberg. And if you can see, the iceberg below the line and the iceberg above the line have different lengths and breadths. Those ships which have gone down as submarines can locate the iceberg's length, breadth, depth, everything below the water. But that ship, which is unable to go below the water, or the fish, the fly, whatever, people who are unable to go below and try and find out, to look for the answer to the research question, are unable to get to the length, breadth, depth, and they crash, like the ship on top might crash against the iceberg. So this is an analogy I love to use because that is how mixed method is, and that is how mixed method shows us the pathway to doing things. From here, I will move towards different strategies of mixing methods and linking data. But before that, I would, of course, like to say that qualitative research approach is an approach which explores and helps us to understand the meaning of group of people usually ascribed to a particular social or human problem. And this plays a very crucial role when exploring factors such as sociocultural, socioeconomic, socio-demographic, and it describes the perceptions, attitudes, and behavior of the sample. You can even take examples from different consumers, uh, consuming food, consuming different kinds of clothing. You can talk in terms of local level people who do not address or who do not want to address these problems. So they could be innumerous methods of looking into and trying to break down the insights by combining qualitative and quantitative research. And this is a kind of methodology that helps to uh, collect, analyze, integrate data. And it also invites, it actively invites, I would say, multiple dialogues that allows you a way of seeing and hearing and trying to make sense of the social world, the multiple standpoints, and of course certain valued or cherished understandings by the participants of your research. And given this kind of a spectrum of factors that influence the concept of sustainable outcomes, uh, sustainable transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary inquiry that investigates into the whole spectrum of factors. Maybe when you get so many factors as outcomes of your research, you may not add that to your research understanding. Just as I showed you in the previous slide, that this particular ship that has gone below the water is not taking into account maybe the fish, the say the diver, but is definitely taking into account the size, length, and breadth of the rock, the ice. So trying to focus on particular maybe they are disjointed understandings that you're getting, but there could be evidence-based understanding which comes from this whole spectrum, and you can pick from there in a logical way. Of course you need to have that logic to do it. So when you take that logic and you understand it in the logical format, you try and focus. Maybe that is a very unfocused area which will come into perspective. I'll give you another example here. I am somehow very aligned to doing mixed method research, and I like to do interdisciplinary research. I've been doing it for a very long time, pretty long time. One particular research we did, which was in Southeast Asia, and we had to travel to some of these countries. I'll share my experience about one of the Southeast neighbors of India. One country which is a Southeast Asian country, which is it is absolutely a direct neighbor to India. That is a war-ravaged country, and so their perspective of development is very different. Although they are at this point of time a very fast developing country, but then again, that country is related to development in terms of their culture. As I said, all this kind of research is culturally oriented. And there was certain thing, we took their data, we had certain questionnaires that we implemented, we took enumerators from there, we did our data collection. And after that, while doing the data collection itself, we realized that there were certain underlying practical understandings that we were overlooking or missing while taking the data. So since we were 3 out of 4 partners in this research were available, we were there together, we decided that we will go in for some kind of an qualitative data collection which will enhance our understanding. So we chose to go by focus group discussion. I will discuss that with you all at the end of this lecture. And we tried to link the kind of analysis they made of the understanding or of the questions that we had put. I'll share with you one particular understanding. Our question was, we were working on women as MSME owners. So the question was, in the interview schedule, the question was, sorry, in the questionnaire, ours was a questionnaire because it was reliability validity checked. The question was that the business is registered in your name, yes or no? Most of the answers we got was no. The next question was, who's the owner of the business? You or your husband, family, or you and your husband together? Most of them said you, me. So this was contradictory. The outcome of this was contradictory. And that was one point of understanding wrongly what was playing behind it. So there were so many such questions. I'm talking about one and giving you this for an example. So we went in and asked them to give us a sample of, say, about 10 or 11 people, where we did a focus group discussion in all the areas we had collected data. And the outcome of the focus group discussion from the various areas of that country was that culturally, that country does not have any such understanding that if a woman is doing business, the business needs to be registered in their name. But the woman thinks that there's nothing wrong in it because she owns the business, because she's running the business. So that the understanding between the ownership and registration of the business does not culturally make them understand it in this way. Had it been India and had I been the woman, I would have said it is not mine because it is not registered in my name. So the ownership is not related to thinking that I run the business. Or the registration and ownership are not two things that are two sides of the same coin. They can be two separate things, two different coins altogether. So moving from here towards the strategies of mixing, I have tried my best to put it as far as possible into pictures so that it is understandable. The first picture is the picture of a desert, and the plants in the desert have been magnified in the picture that has been reset inside. So for a closer illustration of a bigger picture of the background. So what you're doing here is you're trying to probably, this is one of the most common logics that one can understand. And this is often done by researchers to primarily locate and orient the kind of understanding the bigger picture to get the bigger yield from your research. You want to gain a rigorous understanding of the breadth and depth of the analysis. And also, one more thing which is very, very important here is that statistical understanding gives us a very, very numerical, quantified orientation, but it lacks the real life resonance. Now, what do you mean by the real life resonance? From the perspective of the population you are understanding might have so many things that should be illustrated, evocated, and even a close-up view of what they are understanding. My example that I just gave you is a very, very clean example of how the socio-cultural demography of that particular country has some different locale-oriented cultural understanding. Now here in that particular group, there were women who were educated. Some of them were educated in America. Some of them were educated in Europe because they come from rich families and they had a lot of money, so they could go. They send these young girls abroad if they were good in studies, and they had done their business management and things from there. So the logic here is that our culture is like this, that we are in the forefront, we do the work, but anything to connect it with the government policies, anything to connect with the registration is done by the men. So there's a clear demarcation for them. So the national demographic data did not show that there were many number of women entrepreneurs. And that is where, again, there was a big gap that we were addressing. So this is a particular logic which is known as a rhetorical logic, because it is a kind of approach where you can say from whatever their starting point, the researcher uses the other forms of data to elaborate their analysis, to really consider the different arguments that are necessary to uphold. And there's some kind of an additional data that adjusts and supplements your understanding. So mixed method with a rhetorical logic is easy to do, low risk, but of course there is a tendency to have some kind of a polarization in terms of quantitative or qualitative. Any one can be more elaborated upon, more stressed upon, and the like. The second strategy is to ask and answer differently conceived or separate questions. And this is an approach which definitely, there are two sets of research questions which are related to the overall topic, and you want to sort of study. Now, there are two pictures that I have given on this slide. One is the picture of two arrows facing two ways, and the other is a girl pampering or petting her pet dog. So if you take the example of the family pet, the role of the animal, and you take the understanding of in different families in different ways, there'll be multi-parted projects answers. There will be small mini studies that can be generated from this kind of a data, because everyone looks towards their own pet in a different way. So now this kind of a study, if you want to frame, this kind of a study has a parallel logic. What do you mean by a parallel logic? See, the different domains of understanding and interacting with a particular pet can go two ways. That is why I have given the picture of the two arrows. One can move on the either opposite directions. Now, to bring that together, you need to look at the overall essentials that this approach brings forward. As I said in the beginning, when you go into research and you get so many kinds of answers, even if you have a structured interview schedule and the answers that you get, do you utilize everything for your research outcome? No, we don't. We do pick those parts of the understanding which helps us to draw the logic of our research question. So when we are addressing our research question, something that some understandings and some outcomes that go beyond that, we necessarily squash that, and we necessarily do not allow that to be a dominant explanatory outcome in the study. So there are some challenges that this kind of research faces, and these challenges have to be cut across. And at that point, one has to imagine or look forward to some innovative opportunities to try and link the different mini study data that you're getting, try and explain how one is linked to the other, and the multi-part of the multi-question of the studies that you're doing. They are all mini projects because everyone's pet is pampered and looked at in a different way. So the methodological boundaries of each of these studies is different. And if the team members who are doing this study are prepared to ask each other, try and allow each other's understanding to have a co-presence in the method, then the method works out well. And if that does not do this and generates certain other questions, then of course this particular strategy does not stand its truth. The parallel logic is a pretty weak logic, but however, it exists in mixed method. Coming to the third strategy, that is to ask questions about connecting parts, segments, or layers of a social whole. Now, some studies are designed with several or multiple components, as with the previous example, and also with clear sense that these deal with integrated parts of the whole. Now, here again, I have given you two pictures. One is a wedding cake, which has three layers, and the other is the jigsaw puzzle. So here the study have multiple components. See, there are four components of a jigsaw puzzle, which is addressing this. And different methods can be deployed because each is felt to be best suited to its specific part of the problem. The interlocks, if you take at this picture, however they have interlocked, we must understand that that interlock faces that particular specific shape. If it did not, it would not fit in there. So that is why we say that different methods may be deployed because the researcher feels that that best suits that particular specific part of the understanding, that specific part of the research question. And in combination, they give you a better understanding of the whole and can address the meaningful group of questions like this four-part jigsaw puzzle. Now here I can pose a question, a particular understanding that we could explain and talk about. Let's take the example of how under these pandemic conditions, children are learning successfully. One might use this strategic combination and look forward to data from the secondary analysis of the national or local quantitative data on education outcomes. You can take the demographic data of different kinds of children in different socio-economic strata. We can also explore the contextual data analysis of the local education authority, say for that matter, our state, how our state is trying to trace the practicability of teaching school students. School-based ethnographic understanding, if there is anything, there is a lot in the internet now. And try and interview a few key informants in and outside school and ask how they could give us the understanding about the children and their studies. We know that all of us have watched it on TV, on on state TV, local TV, how parents have run to the schools and asked the schools to sort of look into how the fee structure, look into the possibilities of how they could change the manner in which children they have to pay their fees and everything. But this has rather run into a controversy. And this particular understanding is looking at an integrative logic where the different types of layers of data are a part of the whole, but the whole that is being portrayed has lots to talk about. I have tried to put it into perspective in my next slide. This is absolutely based on the UNICEF report. UNICEF report shows that after lockdown in India, 247 million children have been impacted. And these are children who have been enrolled in the elementary and secondary education. And the reasons for it, as cited by UNICEF, is the digital divide and also the gender divide. The report shows that only 24% of the household in India have access to internet, and there's a large rural-urban and gender divide. The rural-urban divide, I can give you an example that Delhi University, as it started its online classes, I'm talking about Delhi University. So as Delhi University started its online classes, it came in the national newspapers that there were a number of children who were from Noida and other parts of Uttar Pradesh. They informed their concerned teachers to keep the classes in between 11 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the afternoon so that they could access their classes. After 3 o'clock, after slowly the sun starts setting, they have to come down to their homes from their terrace or from the terrace of other people's house where they are sitting for these classes. So you can here show the divide. I'm not talking about rural, urban, not gender, anything, but there is a digital divide that exists. On the left-hand bottom corner of your screen, you can see a large number of children are likely to miss out on the distant learning opportunities because they cannot access it. So that is, again, a very, very important part of learning. So what are these children exposed to? They are exposed to the virus. In the long run, they are exposed to the fallout. What is that fallout? That fallout is the fragility of the learning system. They are not going to go back to this learning system. So this is a particular example which shows how the escalation of violation, sexual abuse for these children, ample number of child marriages have taken place in this whole time. And we have seen that how these children are so vulnerable, whereas there are other children who are, of course, getting the access to the kind of learning and to the kind of understanding we mean by online learning. Now, the logic here is that you start from trying to explicate a particular secondary data and move on to the kind of unspoken data in that particular secondary data, which cannot be located in that particular secondary data. So the research team needs to, or the researcher needs to, try and look at some self-evident, say it could be visuals, it could be some self-evident reports, it could be some you can even have some interviews if you can access, and that could supplement your particular understanding as to quote unquote what successful learning is happening through these online mediums that we are trying to do. Now, when if you ask me, had I been told to take this class offline, I would have been much happier because I could see all of you and I could see your faces. So the interaction of a face-to-face existence is much more than just talking to you over this particular laptop, over where you can hear my voice, you can see the screen, but I cannot see you. On the other hand, there are some challenges for this particular kind of a research that is engaged with the kind of research question that you need to address or formulate, and how the different forms of data, which may be interdisciplinary, which may not very easily be, rather I would say it would not be very pragmatic to engage closely with the theoretical understanding interdisciplinary way, but trying and unearthing the differences, if the differences are not, I would say they do not match each other for that matter. You try and take the fractured explanations and view them in a particular kind of a parallel logic. And this you would love to do, as I view it. It is the greatest opportunity for mixing methods using an integrative logic, as I said in the slide before. And this is, say, if you have a project for that, you look at the project, try and bring it into the particular disciplines that are attached, look at the theoretical orientations that are there. And I don't believe that one discipline cannot complement, or there is no complementarity in interdisciplinary research work. On the other hand, integration of the data can help to theorize a particular understanding, which is both, I would say, interdisciplinary, as well as a particular discipline getting an innovative means of stepping forward in a particular uh, understanding. But these opportunities can be best done if the researchers who are doing it, if it is interdisciplinary, there is more than one researcher in that particular project, then it has to be a very amicable understanding of the researchers to do it. But when a researcher individually is trying to do it and gets an outcome which can be explained by, say, some economic theory, you can always use it. Like economics has many theories to explain migration, whereas sociology relies upon those economic theories to explain migration. So this is how there is a compatibility between two different kinds of disciplines and how they can support each other. Coming to the next, to achieve accurate measurement through triangulation. Here you're trying to seek, integrate data, analyze in terms of triangulation. The picture shows that you are using a particular instrument to sort of pinpoint, validate, improve, and bring to accuracy as much as possible, to use that particular justification for the method to be used more than once. This is definitely a narrow and specific version of integrative logic, but it is not alone integrative, it is corroborative logic. Because this version of triangulation draws on the corroborative forms of data and method, and to corroborate what they are measuring, and sometimes to corroborate each other, that is, what is being measured and what is not being measured. It is very, very useful and very, it is needed, I would say. So the challenges are many, but you can emphasize on the precision and measurement of the particular format, and this is helping always. It is complex because in the procedural nature, there are many modes in social science explanation that approaches straightforwardly. But here, I would say, to improve, to pinpoint, to test, or to validate, to find accurately may not be very straightforward way of corroborating. But then we cannot give up the conservative logic that the researcher has her or his own way of seeing and asking questions. And ultimately, the conservative logic lies with the researchers and the researcher's understanding of how the researcher would try to project or analyze, for that matter, not project, analyze and pinpoint the socio-cultural orientations of the geographical coordinates or the economic coordinates or the social phenomena, whatever you're looking at. So triangulation is basically trying to integrate data and analyze through how one particular data is supplementing the other and how that data is being used to improve, test, validate towards an accurate understanding. Now, coming to my fifth one, and this is a very interesting part of research method, that is to ask the distinctive but intersecting questions. See, the picture shows a networked society, and the inset shows the network society in a closer format. So what is this trying to point to? It would be a pity if we were to conclude that mixing methods is just too problematic because there are parallel logics and ultimately not very satisfying, and because genuinely corroborative logic can be questioned. But different methods and approaches have the potential to enable the researcher to ask contrasting, distinctive questions about the social world and to conceptualize them while they are doing the research. Now, what would the count as knowledge or evidence about it in different ways? That is, how many times, how many people, how they interact, and what they are saying, does that match the researcher's assumption? If it does match the researcher's assumption, then the researcher's assumption, which is based on the available literature, is corroborated. And therefore, those differences that do not corroborate and the relationships between them are very exciting, especially when they express differences between the ontologies. What is the ontology? What is there and what can be known? What the researcher has overlooked. It exists, but we overlooked as a researcher to look into it. The epistemologies. What can be known? What else can be known? As I have looked what is there out there, I have overlooked that. Automatically, I'm overlooking what can be known. And this is absolutely interdisciplinary in its relevance. Because something that is relevant in economics may not be relevant in toto in sociology. Rather, something that is relevant in sociology may not be relevant till economics adopts it to be relevant. So here, the multidimensional logic plays a very, very important role. So it is possible to envisage a group of questions about the social world which calls for intersection, interplay, distinct ways of seeing, do not involve the one model of integration. The issues and problems are multidimensional and they exist in a very uneasy, messy way, which we are not looking into. Maybe we have overlooked that. The different ways of perceiving and interrogating the social world that is being represented in different methods, in different paths, in different multidimensional ways. Therefore, the argument that different methods and approaches have distinctive strengths and the potential which, if allowed to flourish, can help us to understand the multidimensionality of the complex society in which we exist. Because if you look at the different intersections, you look at the picture on your screen, there are many intersections that you can see. And that which has been highlighted, which has been inset in the bigger picture, the green lines will show you that there is a connection between all, but may not be a direct connection. So the logic that is ultimately produced by this kind of an integrated account or explanation is being researched is that there could be multiple nodes, multiple dialogues and explanations which are based on dynamic relationships, more than one way of seeing and researching it. And these dynamic relationships may have underlying factors which account for asking questions and answering them. And these again definitely look towards something that is challengeable, which has a lot of opportunities, but it is challenged also. How do we challenge it? It requires considerable skill and commitment of the research and researchers team, that is of course there, but then again it should be having the capacity and inclination to look at and see beyond your own discipline. So the interdisciplinary relevance of any kind of research and any kind of perspective or critique on that particular type of research is very, very important. I myself have done a lot of interdisciplinary research, and I respect how interdisciplinary research allows you to flourish and allows you to look at the multidimensionality of everything. So instead of just trying to interlock and keep it within the theoretical understanding of your discipline, if you do get a particular theoretical understanding which is not directly from your discipline, but it enhances and corroborates and supplements your disciplinary findings, it is always important to look into it and harness the same for your research. So if you harness the same for your research, automatically you will be giving your research much more value, much more enhancement than just getting it in your own discipline. And finally, mixing methods is, of course, very opportunistic, and the researchers have some form of control over research design, process, shape, and form of data emerging from the mixed method study. And sometimes mixing methods and data can be possible more by accident than by design, where existing data sets become available unexpectedly or where access is available to a potential data source. The intrinsic logic definitely allows you to avail the opportunity to use that particular data with your empirical data and corroborate it, supplement it, get to the findings. Okay, from here I move on to what are the different features of mixed method design. And the different features of mixed method design are TTIPP. What is TTIPP? It is theoretical lens, timing, integration, purpose, priority. Now coming down through the arrows to the bottom, you will find theoretical lens is explicit or implicit. Timing is concurrent, or sequential. Concurrent is parallel, or sequential, one after the other. Integration is in what phase you are doing it, the strategy you're maintaining for the 2 or 3 phases that you want to do it in. It could be data analysis, rather data collection first in one kind of a data collection, and then you move on to the other. I will give it to you graphically a little later. And the purpose, you want triangulation, you want development and initiation and expansion of your understanding, or you want to complement your understanding. It could be any. And priority. Priority is what is the priority that you're giving to the methods that you're using. Basically, there have been identified 3 main dimensions of mixed method. The first is the timing dimension. What will timing of qualitative and quantitative method be? In which order will the researcher collect and use the data? Will it be concurrent, both sets of data are collected at the same time, that is parallel, or sequential, one set collected before the other? The second dimension is the weighting dimension. What will be the relative importance, weight or priority given to the qualitative and quantitative method and data in answering the study's question? The general possibilities are equal weighting to both approaches or unequal weighting, with one approach carrying more weight. Third, the mixing dimension. How will qualitative and quantitative methods be mixed? And especially, how will the 2 data sets be mixed? The possibilities here are that the 2 data sets can be merged, one can be embedded within the other, or they can be connected in some way or the other. So to generally understand mixing of methods, most of the time we go by these 3 dimensions that we are looking towards. When we come to the dimension of mixing and what is the weightage that we are giving to mixing, we definitely look at the possibilities of which data is giving us what outcome and how it is enabling us. Following from my previous slide, sequential or chronological data, quantitative and qualitative method used one after the other. Parallel or concurrent simultaneous data, quantitative and qualitative method used at the same time. This can have 2 kinds of research design. One is explanatory research design, and the other is exploratory research design. I have tried to put it into graphics. Explanatory design, you have quantitative data and results first, which is followed up by qualitative data and results, from where you move towards interpreting the whole. You are not taking both datas together. You are having one following the other. It is same with exploratory design. Here too, you have qualitative first, and on the basis of the qualitative and how the qualitative is giving you certain concepts, themes, you base your quantitative data and result. Based on the qualitative thematic analysis, the quantitative data is collected and analyzed, and then you try and locate how much of the two are compatible, conflictual, whatever, and how they complement each other, whether one expands the other, or whether at all there is no connection between the two. It cannot be, because when there is a thematic understanding from the first to the second, automatically there is some connection. That's why you have moved from one to the other. This is the sequential explanatory design. Here you are taking the quantitative first and the qualitative next. You collect the data, you analyze the data, on the basis of which you collect the qualitative data and analyze the data. And then you are doing an interpretation of the whole, entire analysis. The two analyses put together, you are trying to interpret from the two analyses to bring out the final analysis or the final findings of the research process. Sequential exploratory design. Here you are getting, since it's exploratory, I said in my previous slide, exploratory qualitative comes first. So it is qualitative first and quantitative second. Here again, the qualitative data generates a lot of understanding on the basis of which you move to your quantitative data. And because qualitative data generates some thematic understandings, which pulls out the essence of the research question, the data that you get for quantitative, from the quantitative research design either enhances the qualitative or is corroborating the qualitative. For concurrent, it is the first, that is qualitative, it is, for explanatory, it is quantitative first. You collect data, analyze data, and then you go to the qualitative data and you analyze the findings. And for the exploratory, it is qualitative first. You collect the data, you analyze the data, and you move to the quantitative. Now, both these data are compared, and the results, when compared, you get the understanding of the whole outcome. But to do something that is concurrent, if it is a research project, you need a bigger team to do it, because both kinds of data have to be collected together. But if concurrent design, triangulation design is possible, it is a better option than having it done sequentially. From here, I move to some of the emergent methodological approaches and designs that have developed in recent years. I cannot get into all of them, so I have picked up on a few. And I think the ones I have picked up on will be interesting enough for you to understand how the positivist quantitative methodology can be supplemented by, or can be supported by, corroborated by, complemented by, enhanced by the qualitative methods. See, as researchers, we have varied preferences that are linked to our way of doing the research. But whether you're doing research in human development, whether you're doing research in nutrition, or for that matter, sociology, you are looking at people as the objects, because all this falls within the purview of social science and the social world to which people belong. You are looking at that particular social world. However, whatever we learn in class, whatever our teachers teach us in class, and whatever we have learned for research methodology over the years is something that gives us the preference of making a particular choice and trying to do our research. What we overlook while trying to use the comfortable strategy is that the view of the social world through the people's eye is very important, because that is what gives us the insider's view. The insider's view is something that allows you to locate yourself in that particular situation and locate your research findings based on that particular setting. So the choice of method depends on the research questions and the available resource. Again, this available resource and the choice of question is very, very important. And I would suggest always that the researcher should enable oneself to allow a particular natural setting, involve the actual experience of the people around. And when you are involving the actual experience of the people, that is your sample, you are always focusing on the people's perception in the natural setting. And your focus does not remain only on the numbers of the natural setting. That is 2, 4, 6, 8, whatever is your code. No, the data content can have a very rich enabling natural setting, which enables you, okay, in this particular setting, we get this kind of an outcome. I'll give you a small example here. We have just completed an ICSSR project, and it has been appreciated by the particular financing agent house. The ICSSR has appreciated the outcomes of the project. In that project, on a day when we were doing data collection, it's way back in 2018 March. It was quite a summer, hot day in the summer. And we, as researchers, we had divided ourselves into 3 groups because we are 3 members in the research team. And we had separate set of enumerators collecting the data in the natural setting. And where I was placed, of course, it was my choice. Nobody told me to go there, but I went there. And where I was placed in that particular natural setting, there were these women, that particular research is again based on SHG women, self-help group women. These women who were doing these self-help groups, who were members or who owned the self-help groups, there were a number of young women. While giving their interviews, face-to-face interviews with the enumerators, some of them said that they would like to talk to me. And there were about 4 or 5 of them whom I could entertain. I could not entertain all of them. But all of those 4 or 5 of them were accompanied to the interview setting with someone from their home, someone senior, mother-in-law, elder sister-in-law, or so on and so forth. Only women were allowed, so the father-in-law, the husband could not come. I share it with you as my first-hand experience. All 5 of them had something to say about the data that they are giving. And from the understanding, something came out, which is pathetic, which is very, very sorry state of affairs, but it is the truth. They said, for a number of questions we have answered in the affirmative because my mother-in-law was standing near me. Then I asked her, "Well, how did you how is it so that she did not come here when you're talking to me?" She said, "I spoke to the enumerator and I told your enumerator to hold her back while I am talking to you." This happened with the occasion of about 3 or 4 of them. And there was one lady who came to me. I have the picture of that. I could have shared it. However, it's not here in my laptop. Uh, who was talking to me. You can just imagine she's sitting face to face. It was not Corona time, so we were sitting very close to each other and face to face. Her right hand was covering her mouth so that whatever she's saying is not very clearly heard by her mother-in-law, who was standing on my left and her right, because we were sitting face to face. She almost whispered into my ears, and she said the same thing, that they don't let me go out of the house. Today also she has accompanied me. Whatever money I earn, they take it away. I'm just a symbol of this particular SHG, so on and so forth. So the data that we got by just getting those ticks and numbers in the positivist quantitative method had lots of such experiences that we could share. I'm just sharing one with you. So this is that picture also is a very, very elaborative, content driven picture. We have shared that picture in our report, and the picture itself tells a lot how this woman was trying to tell us something which was not being, she was not being able to say when she was speaking to the enumerator. Okay, moving on from here. Data content of visuals and textual material or oral history. This was oral history. This is something that is oral history. And the picture was a visual material that explains, can help you to explore so many things more and explain the how, the why of some particular phenomena, some particular events, experiences, and all this is culturally loaded. This is absolutely culturally loaded because personal experience, when you ask a person to give you the personal experience, there are many such incidences where the anxiety of being divulged, whatever the person is saying, the anxiety of that being divulged plays a very, very contextual role. And to understand that, you need to make the person who is giving you the answer, give the person that platform, that ease, that nothing will be divulged. Everything is going to remain. You are going to remain anonymous. And there is going to be utmost confidentiality, no names written, no other identifications given. And that is a part of the ethical considerations also, which UGC today has made mandatory. You need to understand that. So to describe something, systematically analyze some personal experience in order to understand the cultural perspective is very important, but it is also important that we look at the confidentiality, the anonymity, and protect the identities of these people. Social science has devoted a lot of attention to research methods over the last decade. And I have taken up 3 emergent methods. One is the naturalistic inquiry, one is the narrative design, and the other is the visuals, which is a primary way of engaging. Coming to the naturalistic inquiry, it expresses one view of the natural reality. It is the view of the real world in a dynamic system, all of whose parts are interrelated, and they are inevitably influenced by other parts. One part is influenced by the other parts. And also it helps you to understand the real world. The parts cannot be separated bit by bit, but the parts must be examined in a contextual whole, and essentially a phenomenological view. It differentiates from the logical positivistic view of the reality of the world. Now, why do I say that it is essentially helping us to differentiate from the logical positivistic view? I gave you an example a few minutes back where if these women did not make it a point to come and give me the understanding from the background literature, from the apparent viewing of what the data in the positivist mode gave us, essentially the reality would be left out. Because we need to employ a direct contact between the investigator and the actor in a situation while collecting data. So there were two enumerators who were from sociology background, and they were given the charge to collect the qualitative data. Qualitative data had hardly 6 or 7 questions, but that entailed the whole interview schedule. And the pictures of those girls sitting on the floor on a big chatai, surrounded by so many women, was a scene which showed how these women were so interested to give the investigator their understanding of their perception of the situation. So this is an emergent strategy that is designed to study something that is emergent, that is there, rather than just take the prior specifications. The prior specifications are the secondary data. And the data categories that you are examining and the data collection that you are doing, if it does not match, that is again another parameter, that is another finding that comes up. And if you do not attempt to generalize the findings in a universe beyond the boundary of your study, then it is different. But if you want to generalize and try and make it say a statement, a policy, a practice that is being done, you want to talk about the practice that is being done, you need to have the emergent data. You need to have the actors telling you as investigators what the actors are facing, how they are facing it, and what the actors think about it. Because the real world is dynamic. It is not stagnant in one particular reality which has been studied by someone else, which may not have, which may have or may not have the same implications today. I move on to my next form of qualitative research design. This is narrative design. The narrative design is usually based on individual experiences, which usually come in a chronological way. The stories of these individual people are collected and recollected, restoring is allowed. You quote the themes from these stories, and from these stories, the coded themes are used for the context or the setting, and you try and get data from the participants by collaborating. So what is this arrow all about? The arrow stands for identifying a phenomena, purposefully select an individual from whom you can learn about the phenomena. That is, you are trying to locate an individual in that natural setting where the phenomena occurs, or you think it occurs on the basis of the secondary data that you have, the record that you have. Collect the story from that individual or individuals for that matter. Pick the story and go to another individual and find out whether the story is retold. If the story is retold and the storyteller is giving you, the storytellers are giving you an understanding. You write the story about the participant's experience, and that report validates or gives you, because you have a number of stories validating the same understanding. So by validation of that kind of an understanding, you move to the codes or the themes for the themes that you have generated. And that allows you to contextualize those themes in the research setting that you are thinking about. I don't say that this particular narration, that narrative design goes beyond the research setting that you've thought of. No. No, it does not. It stays within the research setting, but it's a little more labor that you are giving, that you're trying to pick the themes according to your research area and not picking on whatever is there in the background of the research area. You're pulling from there and just throwing them around. No, it's not that. You're allowing an individual to share their experience, and that experience is shared chronologically. And while there's a chronological sharing of experience, that experience gets collected, and the same experience is being experienced by more than one person. And as it is being experienced by more than one person, it gives you the themes, and the themes that you get, you pick on those themes to have them corroborated. You try and move them towards a particular understanding where you contextualize, you collect data from the larger population in a sample form. I move to my third kind of research that can be done. These that I'm speaking about, these can be elaborated. They have many strategies. They have philosophical foundations. I'm not getting into all that. I believe, and social science believes too, that the power of the visual is unique and very, very powerful. Because visual data produces a unique avenue to gain access to the inner feeling, memories, and forms of information that are often less accessible by other methods. As I started in the beginning, I spoke about data being empirical, research being empirical. So when something is empirical, it is related to our senses. And the most powerful among the senses is our eyes, is the vision. So visual data is a very, very unique and powerful avenue to gain access to the inner feelings, understandings, and forms of information. I've just tried to be as contemporary, as contingent as possible. Ways visual helps: they are units of analysis, they are tools of presentation, and they are tools of research too. I have given you a number of pictures on your right, which represent the new normal code of everyday life, of post-corona days. You can see the little girl who's sitting on the floor with a smartphone. This has become a mandatory possession these days for anybody who wants their child to study. So the unit of analysis, if I take as an example, the unit of analysis is successful learning, then this visual itself represents that what else could be supplemented along with just learning to make learning successful. So visuals really rely on production and representation of knowledge. This production and representation of knowledge relates to how we see, understand, and represent or act upon. These visuals again show that again here. You look at the metro on top, next to the picture of the girl. There are demarcations made where you cannot sit and where you can sit. I think by this time, most of you have visited the malls as they have just opened. There also on the escalators, every 2 steps, there is a line made and you can get onto that step. You are asked to leave 2 steps while coming down or going up the escalators. That represents, the line represents the knowledge that that line wants to produce. And it's an evidence when you look at that, whether at all people are abiding by it. Again, the picture here on your right. It is a witness of the event that people are standing within the circles. It is representing that in society, in nation, we as people are at times abiding by it. I don't think we are always abiding by it because we can amply show many such pictures where people are not doing it. But this particular visual is constructing a particular identity, and it is a material which forms our understanding of this image in context of use. Why does this happen with visual images? Because visual literacy is related to language, communication, learning, thinking, which is all again based on our perception. So if I want to look at these pictures in a different manner and want to say that these pictures are very imposing, these pictures are very irritating, these pictures confront our normal life, so on and so forth. There could be many such statements that could be made. Why? Because anything that is visual is based on our perception. And perception comes from language, thinking, learning, and communication. So this is again a very good medium which can substantiate, which can help our positivist method of research. I have tried to show you how mixed method studies can collect data. So, of course, mixed method studies do have another very good option of collecting data, that is case study method, but I have not gone into that. I've taken up 2 methods here, which I think if you use are very helpful. One is in-depth interviewing, which is a qualitative research technique that involves conducting intensive individual interview with a small number of respondents to explore their perspective on a particular idea, program, situation. It yields a lot of rich data, detailed data, rather than a very opened up, thrown about data. It can also give you some kind of a new insight which can help you to explore a little more in depth. It is affordable. It allows the interviewer to explain and help clarification of the questions if the interview is having any problem. And it is very flexible to administer to a particular individual if the choice of place and time is according to the individual. And it may also have a very, I don't find it very relevant, but of course it does have some disadvantages too. And these disadvantages are informations may be too large and too difficult to transcribe. And the second method of data collection, which is very informative, is information produced by focus group discussion. It explores people's beliefs, attitudes, and opinions. It indicates the range of communities' beliefs, ideas, opinions. That is, they are valuable for gaining baseline information for projects. They are useful in designing questions, question guides for individual interview, and questions for structured interviews also. So if you are doing an exploratory research design and you want to use exploratory mixed method, this is a very good way to begin. There has been a very good research under me, which is already awarded, which has been done in this process, and it has yielded unique results. The research itself is unique. It's first of its kind in India, and the research has yielded very good results by doing focus group, then in-depth and thematic evaluations through positivist method. Now, focus group discussion uses a lot of transcript-based analysis, and this transcript-based analysis can be, of course, taped, noted, memorized, anything. But you know, if you are trying to develop some themes from a particular transcript which an individual is giving you, and where, if I go back to my previous slide, where you want to explore the beliefs and attitudes of the person that you are trying to, the population that you are trying to understand, then what we need to do is that we need to collect this kind of a data from, say, 1 or 2 focus groups, try and get to the baseline of the information that this particular data is giving you, where you might delve into, where you might get out some, say, about 10 to 15 themes that will develop. And those themes, how it is relevant to your literature that you have had or that you have got, you pick from among them and design questions guided by these themes in your structured interview shooting. I'll give you a very pertinent example. Suppose you are doing research on adolescent children and their likes and dislikes. You have a question about their likes and dislikes and their choice of the kind of food or food outlets. Now, if you go to them in the positivist mode, you will give them the questions the way you have understood your choice of food, or the way you have understood based on the literature that you have got. But children today have a mind of their own, and when spoken to with confidentiality and anonymity, they will give you much more than you can expect them to give. They might even tell you that the kind of food they usually show they like, they usually project they like, are not the kind of food they would prefer. So that makes the difference in the opinion, belief, and ideas that they have. Why do they say then that they like this, they like that? They say it because that is the kind of cultural socialization that has made it normative for them to make people believe that this is the way they are. There has been a research which has been done under me on friendship. And I use this example very often when I'm teaching anywhere. And I found that how children have different ideas about what friendship should be, how to make friends, and how, when they are making friends in childhood, that is when they are in school still, they do not divulge to their guardians the kind of friendship they would like. They rather abide by the understanding of their guardians, of the kind of friendship they would prefer, rather the guardians would prefer. And they keep to that. They only move away when they are big enough or matured enough to explain why they are moving away from there. So children today are very intelligent, so they do it this way. There could be others who don't do it this way, they can do it very blatantly. So these differences can be very well evaluated when we go by such focus group discussions, in-depth questioning, and the like. Thank you. I come to the end of my lecture. I think I'm well within time.
Thank you so much, Sudeshna Di. It was such a beautiful lecture because not only you have traveled such a wide kind of a canvas, but it was the best part was that you have related with the real life experiences. It was so nice to hear to all of them. I am very sure our students must have
Were you
gained.
sitting here throughout?
Yeah.
Were you sitting here throughout?
Yeah, I was there. I was there. No, I loved it. I loved it. And
That's bad, Purba. That's very
uh,
bad.
dear students, do you have any
Yes,
queries
any
or
questions if you have?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I have a question. So, ma'am, we were discussing about the combination of quantitative and factors. So, like for example, we are doing a quantitative study, and after that we go for a qualitative study based on the results. Ma'am, do you think we will have difficulty in getting the response from the candidates in terms of the qualitative response? Because many times in quantitative technologies, we just click and we just go ahead. But in qualitative methods, we need to really answer. Plus, ma'am, the sample size also. Like in quantitative methodologies, we usually have a very big sample size. And then using that same sample size for a qualitative method or an interview, do you think it will become a little difficult?
Should I answer one by one? Anybody else has a question? Okay, I'll answer her. See, qualitative methodology does not look forward to or does not ask you to take such a big sample. It can, the minimum is 30. So, whatever you're doing, if you're going for an in-depth interview, you have to select a part of your larger sample and go for the in-depth interview. So, the sampling for qualitative is much smaller. If it is 100 for quantitative, 30 will suffice for qualitative. And that is justified because there are many such definitions which will give you the justification for using only 30.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, just one more question, ma'am, regarding photographs. Ma'am, sometimes it happens that many a times photographs are clicked after placing people in certain situations and circumstances. Like it is created and then the photograph is taken.
No, but you have to have a particularly naturalistic photograph. If you use a photograph which is mocked, that is different. No, you don't use such photographs to do such things. You try and take a photograph which is relevant to your work, of course, but then that relevance has to be not created. It should be natural. And that is to be that is left to the researcher to understand that.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
any more questions? I suppose they don't have any further questions. Thank you so much, Didi, for your wonderful lecture and all the time and effort you have given it to us. On the behalf of the Department of Home Science, my wholehearted thanks to you. and we wish to hear from you in future also, and we wish you all the best in all the academic endeavors in future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Purba. Thank you, students. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
ঠিক আছে, আজকের মতন হলো, তাহলে আমরা আবার কালকে মিট করছি, গৌরাঙ্গ বাবুর ক্লাস আছে। ওকে
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
ওকে।